Hello, this is Al Jazeera live from Doha. You are watching our extensive coverage of the war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. I'm Riley Carlson. Missiles hit multiple strikes across Iran's Isfahan province. At least 15 people have been killed. U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to continue bombing Iran's coastline to force an end to Tehran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard responds with threats of its own, warning people across the Gulf to evacuate areas near oil ports. Israel launches strikes in southern Lebanon, killing 4 people inside it. There's growing concern of a possible ground invasion. And the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad is targeted in a missile strike. Factions supporting Iran are intensifying their attacks on foreign outposts. Thank you for joining us. The conflict between the U.S., Israel, and Iran is now in its 3rd week. It's continued to be a war of aerial bombings and long-range strikes. The main battleground, for now, is control of global energy supplies and the Strait of Hormuz. In central Iran, there's been multiple strikes in Isfahan province. One bombing killed at least 15 factory workers and wounded several more. A Revolutionary Guard's command center has also been targeted. President Donald Trump says allies who rely on Gulf oil must help protect the Strait of Hormuz. He says countries are sending warships without providing details. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has pledged to keep up attacks on U.S. assets in the region. Iran says it's now launched a new wave of strikes towards Israel. At least 7 people have been injured by rocket fragments in the southern city of Eilat. Air raid sirens have sounded in several parts of the country. We are live from Washington, D.C., Amman, Beirut, Erbil, Doha, and in Tehran. And that is where we will begin tonight with Mohammed Val in the Iranian capital. Mohammed, what can you tell us about these strikes that have been taking place in Isfahan province?
Riley, the information is not that much, but we know from Reuters and also from Fars news agency, which is semi-official, that the strike that killed 15 workers, that those are factory workers, and that the factory produces heaters and refrigerators. So basically a reference there to the civilian nature of this facility. And Isfahan has been under bombardment every single day since the beginning of this war. Isfahan is full of factories of every type, and also something else very interesting about Isfahan, it hosts some of the nuclear facilities there. So there is always a lot of confusion, or at least little information, about the results of the strikes and the nature of targets there. The government here doesn't provide specific information, and also there is even instruction to the media and to the general public not to really give feedback about those strikes. But today they have revealed information about the killing of those 15 civilians. Also, other cities, by the way, had a share of the bombardment, including Bandar Abbas, including Sirjan in the Kerman province, Tabriz, and of course Tehran has seen some of the bombing today, as usual, like the case every day. In the afternoon, the Revolutionary Guard mentioned the downing of 3 drones in the skies of Tehran. So there is no reduction. There is no reduction in the amount of bombardment across Iran, and particularly in Tehran and Isfahan, as I said.
Well, Mohammed, the foreign minister has also been speaking about Friday's attacks on Karg Island. What has Abbas Araghchi been saying about those?
Yeah, the main point there in that interview is that he said that missiles, American short-range HIMAR missiles, were used in that attack. Well, part of the attack was by those rockets, and that they were launched from a neighboring country. When he was asked about that country, he said it's the United Arab Emirates. And he said that some of the launches, some of the attacks came from civilian places close to civilian areas, including in Dubai and Ras Al Khaimah, warning there that Iran is very adamant that it will strike back, as it did from day one, against any location, regardless whether it is near civilian areas or not, because because they have always been warning that the Gulf region countries have to get rid of the American bases and have to avoid launching attacks against Iran from areas that have civilians living in. And also there are instructions by the Revolutionary Guard to people in the Gulf region to stay away from those bases. So there is a strong language there by the foreign minister. Also, he said, by the way, that the Strait of Hormuz is not closed. And this is a very important point to get across here by the Iranian leadership, because the Americans are saying the world should come and coalesce to defend the Strait of Hormuz and to defend the passage of energy from the Strait of Hormuz, as if it is Iran against the world. Iran is preventing and closing that vital supply route, but the Iranians are saying, no, it's not closed. It's closed only to American and Israeli ships and their allies who are cooperating with them in the war on Iran.
All right, Mohammed Val for us in Tehran. And Donald Trump has been posting on Truth Social, commenting on exactly that, the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. He says the United States of America has beaten and completely decimated Iran, but the countries of the world that receive oil through the Strait of Hormuz must take care of that passage, and we will help a lot. The U.S. will also coordinate with those countries so that everything goes quickly, smoothly, and well. This should have always been a team effort, and now it will be. Earlier, U.S. forces launched strikes targeting military sites on the island of Karg. Donald Trump says Iranian forces there were, quote, totally obliterated. The island is a major oil hub and is considered a lifeline for Iran's economy. John Holman is live for us in Washington, D.C. John, we just saw the Truth Social from the president that the countries of the world that receive oil through the Strait of Hormuz must take care of that passage, and we will help. Do we have any more clarity on what kind of a plan is or what's going to happen here?
At the moment, we've just got President Trump putting out his social media posts, quite a lot of them today on Truth Social, but no official plan. We haven't seen Secretary of War Pete Hegseth or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dane Kane, coming out and telling us about anything more in detail. So we don't know, therefore, if this is something that President Trump's just thought of today or if it's something that's more considered. In a previous Truth Social post, he talked about the countries that could be part of that plan: China, France, Japan, South Korea, the UK. We know, obviously, that a lot of the oil that flows through the Straits of Hormuz does go to China and other Asian countries. But the key word, I think, in that post is that hopefully they will send ships to the area, is what he says. So this is something that could be in its infancy and could be a sort of a cry for help at the moment from President Trump. He mentioned as well, interestingly, in the same message, that it's easy for Iran to send a drone, drop a mine or deliver a close-range missile, even if they have inferiority, military inferiority. So sort of not an admission, but a recognition of that it's relatively easy for Iran to disrupt that strait if it wants to.
And, John, we've also heard from the head of the U.S. Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, which, of course, is the broadcast regulator in the United States, that says that broadcasters could risk losing their licenses if they air, quote, hoaxes and news distortions. What prompted this, and are we getting any reaction from news networks?
Yeah, so it all began again with President Trump, again on Truth Social, where he's been doing a lot of typing in the last 24 hours, talking about some refueling planes that the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday were hit during an attack on a Saudi Arabian base. And he was basically saying that that report was purely false, that the report said that they were destroyed and they weren't destroyed. I actually read that report when it first came out, and it didn't say that. It just said that the planes were damaged, that they were salvageable and that they were being repaired, and that this happened not just now, but in recent days and other of the things that he attacked. So it was a slightly exaggerated attack. I couldn't see anything in the original article from the Wall Street Journal that was a falsehood that President Trump was pointing out. But after that, then the head of the chair of the Federal Communications Commission weighed in as well, Brendan Carr. This is a supposedly independent US commission that sort of does all the control of communications channels, things like this, and is one of the governing sort of regulatory bodies. He was saying as well, talking about fake news, which has been one of President Trump's carrying cards, and asking saying to the media that they have the chance to correct course before license renewal. So a sort of threat there. It's unlikely that he'd be able to directly do anything without this going through the US courts. But again, some effort to put pressure on US networks after what Pete Hegseth called yesterday that they should be doing patriotic news.
John Holman, live in Washington, D.C. Thank you. More Israeli military movement has been seen in southern Lebanon. Several tanks have been moving around the border area between the two countries on Saturday. In recent days, Lebanon's government has expressed a desire to hold direct talks with Israel to ease tension and stop the fighting with Hezbollah. Rory Challens is in Amman, the Jordanian capital, following these developments for us. So, Rory, Lebanon's government reaching out to Israel, is there a chance of Israel working on some sort of de-escalation framework at this point?
Well, with Israel threatening its biggest ground invasion of Lebanon since 2006, there is a diplomatic track that is opening up. And Benjamin Netanyahu, he's deployed his most trusted fixer, Ron Dermer, to basically head up the Lebanon brief. And the expectation is that on the US side, it would be Jared Kushner. And talks could well begin within days, direct head-to-head talks, possibly in Paris, possibly in Cyprus. And there has been reporting in Axios that the French have proposed a peace plan, a peace proposal that would basically see Hezbollah being disarmed as one of the core demands, but would also see Lebanon recognizing Israel, unprecedented, as a requirement for ending the war, though recently the French Foreign Ministry has denied that reporting. But the Lebanese do say that they are ready for direct talks with Israel. Having said that, the parliamentary speaker, Nabi Berri, who is from the Amal party, a Shia party, which is allied to Hezbollah, has said that there should be a ceasefire before any talks. So that's a potential complication.
Now, Rory, it's also been another day of strikes from Iran and Hezbollah into Israel. What can you tell us about what's been hit there?
Yeah, well, there have been at least 6 volleys on Saturday, some of them with cluster warheads, and they have gone from the south to the centre, up to the north. They've been in the Tel Aviv area, they've been in the Jerusalem area, they've even been in the occupied West Bank. Now, one of the most significant was right down in the south, Eilat, which was actually hit more seriously than the initial report suggested, with at least kind of cluster munitions spreading across 10 different locations, and 3 people that we understand being injured, one of them being a 12-year-old boy. The censor had tried to keep that information contained, but because Eilat is just across the water from the Jordanian city of Aqaba, and citizens, residents in Aqaba were filming what was going on, and Al Jazeera Arabic also had a camera position there filming what was going on, that information couldn't stay contained for very long. But generally on the home front, I think there is a move towards normalization in Israel, with expectations that beginning next week, you might start to have groups of up to 100 people being able to congregate as long as they're close to a shelter. And there's talk of schools reopening next week as well. But caveat to all that, that can't really happen in the north, which is under constant bombardment at the moment from Hezbollah rockets. That can only really take place in areas further away where there's a lower risk.
All right, Rory Challens live for us in Amman, Jordan. Thank you. Meanwhile, Israeli forces continue to launch airstrikes on several areas of Lebanon. Most attacks on Saturday night have focused in the south of the country, with the army claiming it's targeting locations linked to Hezbollah. This is the aftermath of an Israeli attack on the town of Ghassanieh. Video from the scene shows a building completely destroyed and debris scattered into nearby property. In nearby Sidon, 4 family members were killed in an earlier Israeli airstrike. The attack targeted a specific house and sparked a fire on the 2nd floor. Heidi Pett is live for us in Beirut. Heidi, what is the situation like on the ground there today?
As you mentioned, there have been a number of devastating strikes in southern Lebanon today. This is the continuation of a pattern that we have seen of wide-scale destruction of towns and villages in the south, entire buildings being leveled by airstrikes with families inside. The latest numbers that we have updated just a couple of hours ago from the Lebanese Health Ministry is that a total of 826 people have now been killed in this latest round of conflict, 106 of them children, and the number of injured is now above 2,000. Now, breaking down those numbers, because there's been a number of attacks on healthcare workers, notably the night before there was a devastating strike which killed 12 medics in one go in an attack on a primary healthcare facility. But the ministry here has said that it's actually a total of 31 healthcare workers have been killed in the past 14 days. So 2 weeks of war, 31 healthcare workers killed here in Lebanon. And this is part of a pattern that we have seen not just in this war, but also in the last war, where we have seen healthcare workers, ambulances and healthcare facilities being targeted. Now, the Israeli military said today in a statement that Hezbollah was using ambulances to transport staff. They have not supplied any evidence for that claim, but ambulances and healthcare facilities are protected under international law. But it doesn't, it's not making a great deal of difference here on the ground when you see the toll.
Yeah, and Heidi, the United Nations Secretary General is actually in Beirut also, which has been, of course, under repeated Israeli attacks. And during a press conference, Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith asked Antonio Guterres about the legality of Israel's forced evacuation orders across Lebanon.
As a matter of fact, evacuation orders in a situation where so many vulnerable population exist in the areas that are asked to be evacuated does not create enough security for civilians. And whatever does not create enough security for civilians inevitably becomes in violation of international humanitarian law. The protection of civilians is the maximum responsibility of any country at war. And it applies in Lebanon today as it applies everywhere in the world.
But Heidi, we know that there are so many people in Lebanon who do not have any protection. Hundreds of thousands of them have been under these forced evacuation orders. People are sleeping by the sea. People are sleeping in their cars. People have nowhere to go. Is this humanitarian situation getting increasingly dire by the day?
Absolutely, because we have seen those forced evacuation orders expand. So it's the southern suburbs of Beirut. We had another airstrike there just in the last couple of hours, and also a wide swath of southern Lebanon. So originally it was just everywhere south of the Litani River. In the last couple of days, Israel extended that. Now they're saying that everybody south of the Zahrani River needs to leave their homes. But the problem is that not all of these people have somewhere to go. Shelters across the country are massively overstretched. They're trying to rent apartments. Rent is either through the roof or they are, in fact, being turned away. In many instances, apartment owners, landlords, head community leaders in other villages and towns, they're afraid of welcoming in people from the south and from Dahia because they're afraid that those people are going to be targeted wherever they go in the country. And we've seen that with these assassination strikes in areas of Beirut which are outside the southern suburbs. They're not subject to evacuation warnings. They're not subject to any kind of warning at all. And yet missiles come rocketing in, targeting people and sometimes targeting displaced people, as we saw in the devastating attack on Ramat al-Baida down by the beachfront just a couple of days ago. And so what that means is that you have thousands of displaced people who either they can't get into a shelter because it's full or they're not welcome elsewhere in the country because people are afraid. And so they are sleeping on the streets. It has been raining for the last 2 nights here in Beirut. We've had a sandstorm today, so it has been raining dust and mud onto people who are sleeping either in tents, in their cars, or there are indeed still some people sleeping out in the open. And the capacity of the Lebanese state to help these people and assist these people is quite limited. This is a country that's been through a serious financial crisis, the port explosion. It's extraordinarily overstretched. And during the last war, the assistance from the international community, and particularly the Gulf states that was able to pour in, it just isn't there because they're quite preoccupied.
Heidi Pett, live for us in Beirut. Thank you, Heidi. Well, as Israel expands its attacks across Lebanon, there are now fears of an escalating ground invasion. Zaina Khodr reports from Beirut.
Israel is warning this is just the beginning. There's been hundreds of airstrikes in multiple locations. Nearly 1,000 people are killed. Civilians are not spared in what Israel calls its war against Hezbollah. Week 2, and the toll keeps climbing. 2,000 people have been wounded, more than 300 of them children.
When the missile came, it shook the building. It hit our neighbours. The glass, stones, and everything fell on us.
Doctors are concerned about dwindling resources with the mass influx of casualties while treating chronic and other conditions.
This war is very harsh. If we compare it to the 2024 war, we are receiving many civilians.
A ground invasion appears to be next. Israeli troops have been reinforcing their presence along the border and operating in villages inside Lebanese territory, preparing for what could be a major military operation involving creating a kilometers-deep buffer zone. They've begun targeting bridges as part of a military strategy to disrupt the movement of Hezbollah fighters and weapons who continue to fire rockets across the border and engage with advancing troops.
The Lebanese government, which misled and failed to fulfill its commitment to disarm Hezbollah, will pay increasing costs through damage to infrastructure and loss of territory until Hezbollah is disarmed.
International aid agencies are warning Lebanon is facing unpredictable challenges as conflict, mass displacement, and the lack of humanitarian resources converge. Nearly 1 million people have so far been displaced in the latest confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam says that's 1 in 5 people in Lebanon. He's also warning that Lebanon is facing one of the most dangerous chapters in its modern history. The government and the army are under Israeli and U.S. pressure to confront Hezbollah. Doing so could lead to sectarian strife. Hezbollah is still defiant, warning Israel it is prepared for a long confrontation. But this is coming at a cost for a nation where many have still not recovered from the last war 2 years ago. For Mohammed Ta'i, he has already lost it all. 4 daughters, his mother, brother, brother-in-law, and nephew killed in one strike in southern Lebanon.
The Israeli military comes out every day saying that it's striking infrastructure. Is this the infrastructure? I've lost my 4 daughters. The eldest was 13 years old. The youngest was 6. My nephew was 12. My brother was killed. My mother was killed. My father and my brother-in-law were killed.
Zaina Khodr, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
The U.S. Embassy in Iraq is advising its citizens to leave the country immediately. Officials warn that there is a significant threat posed by Iran-aligned terrorist militia groups. The embassy compound in the capital was hit by missiles earlier on Saturday. Al Jazeera has confirmed the attack destroyed part of the embassy's air defense system. Operations at the Lanaz refinery in the city of Erbil have been suspended. On Saturday, a drone strike sparked a fire at the facility. Officials from the Ministry of Natural Resources say work at the refinery will remain halted until the fire is put out and the damage can be assessed. And that is where Asad Beg is for us tonight, live in Erbil with more on this story. Asad, what else are we learning about this attack on the refinery in Erbil?
Well, we understand it took place earlier this evening. It was a drone strike. It hit this refinery on the outskirts of Erbil. Now, authorities say that activities have been suspended there until they assess the damage. Now, that refinery is important for oil production and distribution and makes an important part of the Kurdish region in northern Iraq energy infrastructure. Now, what we have seen is an increased number of attacks over the last few days here in this region against what a group says US assets and military bases, the airport. But this is significant because it is part of the energy infrastructure, and there is concern that the authorities here need to protect that because it makes up the production and export of oil makes up the backbone of the economy here. So authorities here have condemned these groups for carrying out those attacks against this energy infrastructure, as well as institutions and bases here in the region. And they've called on the authorities in Baghdad to rein in these armed factions.
While that happens, Asad, it seems like there is an escalating number of attacks on U.S. interests in Iraq and other interests as well. What can you tell us about those?
Absolutely. There's definitely been an increase in targeting of U.S. assets, interests, bases. Now, earlier today, there was that attack, as you mentioned, in the U.S. Embassy compound, and we understand part of the air defenses were damaged. Now, and even tonight, we've heard of drone attacks taking place, and Iraqi security sources saying that some of those have been intercepted, although debris has fallen near the airport and the Victoria base, and some of it on residential neighborhoods. Now, these armed factions say that they are targeting U.S. bases and interests. But the complicated part of this is that some of these factions, although they are aligned to Iran, are a part of the Popular Mobilization Forces, or the PMF. And the PMF falls under the Iraqi military and receives state funding. So Baghdad is finding it very difficult to balance between Iran, Washington, and these powerful armed factions within its own borders. And the authorities here in Erbil are calling on Baghdad to rein in these groups, condemning their attacks in this region, and we're seeing this widening conflict taking place within the Iraqi borders.
Asad Beg, live in Erbil. Thank you very much, Asad. Iran has threatened port areas within the United Arab Emirates, labeling them legitimate targets. It's warned people in the UAE to leave locations near Jebel Ali Port in Dubai, Khalifa Port in Abu Dhabi, and Fujairah Port. Earlier, smoke was seen rising from Fujairah Port after a drone attack. It's one of the largest oil facilities in the Middle East. It's also an important location for refueling ships. Malik Traina is live for us in Doha. Malik, give us an update of the strikes and the warnings that we've been seeing around the Gulf on Saturday.
Well, yeah, I mean, we saw the smoke, the fire in the Fujairah port, one of the ports that Iran was threatening against. According to the Fujairah port media office, they said that one person was lightly injured, a Jordanian national, due to the debris that fell from an interception. You know, look, we've seen an array of attacks across the entire region. Also in Kuwait, the airport was hit, the radar was damaged. Although it's very important to note that the Iran media agency said that it was not them. You know, it could possibly be groups allied to them from Iraq. We can't independently confirm that. But earlier, the Kuwaiti military said that they detected 7 drones, 3 of which were destroyed. 2 targeted the Ahmed al-Jabr air base, where 3 servicemen were injured, and some material damage happened. Here in Qatar, the Ministry of Defense said that they intercepted a number of drones, 4 ballistic missiles. In Saudi Arabia, a wave of drones, nearly 2 dozen. Many were intercepted in the eastern province, some near the Al-Shaiba oil field. They also intercepted 6 ballistic missiles. So what we're seeing is an escalation, something that people here and across the region don't want to see. We've seen statements from across the Gulf, and there's usually three different themes, right? There's condemnation, and depending on the country, depending on the day, some people will call it a brutal, illegal, or treacherous aggression. They're calling for de-escalation and end to the violence, and dialogue and negotiations. They want a diplomatic solution and a path forward to peace and long-term stability in this region, and that's echoed by many people here.
Malik Traina in Doha, thank you.